Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome to the Messengers in Our Home. Dear Kardec Radio listeners, welcome back to the Messengers in Our Home. Tonight we're going to talk about Chapter 49, The Divine Machine. Hello, Mackenzie.
Hi, Francisca. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another chapter of the Messengers in Our Home.
And as usual, we would like to start with our opening prayer. Taking a moment for a deep breath in and out, letting go of our days, and connecting our thoughts to the higher spheres. Dear Mother, Father God, Creator of the universe and of our yet small hearts, we praise you for your love and for your justice, the laws of the universe that guide our lives so beautifully. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts that you're always there for us, present in our lives, whether we notice it or not. And we thank you especially today for our physical body, this divine machine that you have entrusted us so that we can be incarnate in this world for this life, giving us the opportunities and possibilities to learn and to grow in so many ways. And now we would like to ask you to help us to understand more what that signifies for us, how important it is to take good care of our physical bodies, to prevent illnesses, to work on our mental life as well, because that has consequences to our bodies as well. Please help us to open our hearts and minds so that this very important chapter, the Messengers in Our Home, may penetrate deep into our being, and that we are able to put the teachings into practice in our daily lives. And with your permission, we now would like to start our meeting. And so be it. So let us now listen to the reading of Chapter 49. Enjoy.
Chapter 49, The Divine Machine. In just a few minutes, we were at the side of a dying man. His condition truly concerned the spirit clinician. He was a gentleman around 60 years old and was slowly wasting away with leukemia. He lapsed into a coma several years ago, explained the physician, but we need stronger magnetic aid to facilitate his disengagement. Besides two discarnate women, the dying man's mother and a close relative, his incarnate members of the family were deeply distraught. And he sat to examine the sick man carefully and stated, "There's nothing left but to help his spirit disengage itself." He then suggested that we observe the dying man closely, Concentrating with all my ability, I focused on this man who was about to discarnate. I noticed in detail that his soul was slowly withdrawing through various points of his body. I was astonished at seeing that right in the center of his skull there was a point of dying light, resembling a candle fluttering softly in the wind. It filled the entire encephalic region, awakening in me a deep sense of awe. That light, said Aniceto, is the mind. We have no human concept to explain its exact purpose at present. Noticing my amazement, Aniceto put his right hand on my forehead, giving me a vigorous magnetic influx, and said, "Behold the humanized divine machine, the sacred tabernacle that the Lord enabled to form on earth as the sublime temporary habitation of the Spirit. Andre, you are not looking at an anatomical demonstration of earthly science, examining dead flesh and rigid muscles. Observe, the mortal eye would not be able to see what you are looking at right now. The microscope is also limited, despite the fact that it is a noble victory for limited human eyesight." The magnetic help of our dear mentor had changed the scene, and I was compelled to concentrate all my energies so that my awe would not interfere with my observation. Though dim, the mental light had become sharper, and the body of the dying man seemed to assume gigantic proportions, thereby offering a surprising spectacle to my eager eyes. His body looked like a wonderful factory in its innermost details. That scientific picture was simply astounding. I identified in oversized proportions the 9 organ systems of the human machine: the skeleton, the musculature, the blood circulation system, the blood purification apparatus subsumed in the lungs and kidneys, the lymphatic system, the digestive mechanism, the nervous system, the hormonal glands, and the sense organs. Such a histological display was different from anything I could have dreamed of in my work in medicine. The circulating blood looked like it was moving along life-giving canals of that little world of bones, flesh, water, and residue. Millions of microscopic organisms were coming and going in the current that was depleted of red corpuscles. I witnessed the flowing of strange forms, tiny containers loaded with deadly bacteria. Larger particles of microbial flora were being transformed into tiny boats accommodating minuscule beasts of prey by the hundreds. They were invading all the body's cellular nuclei. The organs, such as the lungs, liver, and kidneys, were being irreparably assaulted by an incalculable number of infinitesimal saboteurs. And as the invading microbes were consolidating in certain cellular areas, something slowly began to stand out in the region under attack. A new form was being expelled from the worn-out and aging one. I realized that discarnation was occurring via a gradual process. It was a valuable lesson. I noticed that some of the glands were making a desperate effort to send certain amounts of hormones to the invaded areas, but they were immediately absorbed by the deadly particles. The blood plasma appeared to be a strange, gangrenous liquid. I saw from the excessive movement of the mental wave that the dying man was trying to regain control of his bodily processes, but to no avail. All the cellular complexes were struggling against one another, and the bacteria seemed to be enjoying their right to increasing and festive multiplication. "Do you see the divine machine formed by a pre-existent spirit mold?" asked Aniceto, understanding my profound wonder. The body of an incarnate human being is a tabernacle and a blessing. From this heart-rending extension of a life, you can see that all the movements of the body are subordinate to managerial processes of the mind. The living body, Andre, represents a laborious conquest of earthly humanity on the Eternal Father's roster of bestowals. You can now identify the movements of living matter. Each organ is an autonomous department in the cellular realm, but subordinate to the individual's thoughts. Each gland is a center of active service. There is a great similarity between the human body and the modern machine. They both run on fuel, but with the difference that in humans, chemical combustion obeys the spiritual sense that directs organic life. The mind governs this wonderful factory. Our mind doesn't possess merely our character, reason, memory, direction, balance, and understanding. It also controls all the phenomena of corporeal expression. In the mental seat, and consequently in the brain, are all the distribution records of the vital principles for the cellular nuclei, including water and sugar. The metabolic centers are large workshops of incessant activity. The human mind, although indefinable by limited scientific earthly concepts, is the center of all manifestations of life on the planet. Each organ, each gland, my friend, plays a part in the work of the sublime machine that has been constructed in the subtle mode of the pre-existent spirit body. And precisely for this reason, the day will come when science will recognize every human abuse as actually being self-inflicted harm. The human factory is a repository of electrical energies of highly constructive or destructive potential. Each cell is a tiny engine running on mental impulse. Aniceto paused for a few moments, and while I was looking awe-stricken at the strange microbial phenomena in the dying man's body, he resumed his instructive talk. Here is a brother at the moment of his disengagement. Notice his inability to control his conflicted cells. His bloodstream has been transformed into a channel for deadly invaders, which have not run into any defensive fortifications. You can observe and identify millions of units of tuberculosis, leprosy, diphtheria, and cancer, which until now had been contained in the cellar of his physiological activity by an organized defense, but which have now multiplied alarmingly, along with other microbes as prolific as they are terrible. Nutrition has stopped. There is no possibility of new hormonal supplies. The dying man is withdrawing bit by bit, but because of a lack of mental education, he still has not totally abandoned his flesh. This can be noticed in the excessive intemperance of the cells, over which he does not even have partial control. It is obvious that he lived completely devoid of self-discipline. His physiological elements are too impulsive, obeying instinct much more than concentrated reason. To tell you the truth, our friend here is not discarnating. He is being expelled from the divine machine, where, from what we can see, it seems he did not fully appreciate the sublime gifts of God. Well, we're starting to get close, very, very close to the end of this book. It's been a long journey, well, at least for us. I mean, it's been almost a year since the day we started reading and commenting on the book The Messengers. And right now that we are feeling at home with the messengers, we are about to start the finish of this wonderful book. We're starting chapter 49, The Divine Machine. And from here on, we have 49, 50, and then 51. So 3 more weeks, 3 more chapters for us to discuss, a few more good reflections on living and also on dying, because it is very interesting that for us to really understand or better prepare or live better, we need to understand that we will all die one day. And by die here, of course, and you've been listening to me repeating this time after time, it's not that we are going to die, right? Our bodies will stay behind, our bodies will die, and we will live on. We will live to live forever, to live, as Aniceto tells us, life victorious, as we finished last chapter, right? When he says that the gospel has already taught us for centuries that God is not the God of the dead, but the Father of creatures who live forever. So once we were created by God, we know that we will live forever. And we have eternity to learn, we have eternity to practice. But the quicker we learn, the more we practice the good things, the good teachings, the more we strive to conform, I wouldn't say conform, but to understand and to follow the guidelines that Jesus set for us, the quicker we will be happier and we will be more able to not only help ourselves, but to help others. Because to serve is one of the main purposes of our lives. So, on chapter 49 and chapter 50, what we will be talking about is about this dying man. And that's why I started with talking about learning about death. Because it is when we really understand and see death, quote unquote, here in our fronts, right? When we are getting older, or when we just stop to think about it, right? Without fear, right? It's not that if we think about death, as some people may imagine or may think out there, that we are attracting death to us. No. Otherwise, I would think about money, and money would come, right? I would think about food, and food would come. So it's not as if I am thinking and then it all comes right away. Of course not. And if we learn how to live better, we will have a better life, and hopefully we will have a great or a better death or deathbed before we go on living our eternal lives. So, the Divine Machine, and that's how chapter 49 is titled. And of course, they are talking about our bodies, which is a divine machine, right? It was created to support this living spirit, right? This spirit that thinks, that has a mind, that has its own wishes, has its own desires, has its own reasoning, these feelings. So it's a machine that has the ability to embrace us, right, as a spirit. And it is a divine machine. And this chapter, although we're going to make some comments on it naturally, and you all heard the reading of the chapter, there are a lot of medical terms in Andre. Since he is a physician, he knows much more of what he's talking about. So I'm going to jump over a few parts of this chapter just because it's a description of the human body, and I'm not the best one to describe it, although I may comment here and there about something that he says. But this, before we get to that point, what we already know is that right after they left the lady that was dead, right, but didn't want to or couldn't accept that she was already dead. Now they move on to this other place, and then they see this man that's not dead yet, but he is dying, right? Up to this point, we don't know who he is. We don't know his name. We know nothing about him. We only know that he is 60 years old and he has leukemia, right? Which is a cancer a blood cancer, right? That these days we can use bone marrow transplant so that we can maybe help the person to get a cure, right? With the transplant of the bone marrow. There are lots of initiatives around the world to collect bone marrow so that we can transplant bone marrow from one person to another. It's very rare that you can find. It's 1 in 100,000 people that are compatible with another person. But there are foundations around that can help you and can help us with the treatment of leukemia. One of them is the Icla da Silva Foundation. I'm only mentioning this because at the Spiritist Center that I go to, we already had two. They visited us twice to tell us about what they do, and they have a lot of volunteers that go around the United States to ask people, right, for to be donors of bone marrow, and they're connected. This foundation is connected to the service here in the United States that allows them to do this job. So it is very interesting, and they go as volunteers into churches, into Spiritist centers, into community centers, and what they do is that they collect our information from 18 years old to 44 years old people, and then they collect the information, if you want to be a donor, and then they get these cotton swabs, and then they swab 4 of them inside of our mouths so that they can collect the samples so that they analyze it and they put it into the database. And if somebody has leukemia all around the world, this database is available to all doctors, and then they check for compatibility. And if you are compatible, which is unfortunately very rare, they can match you, right, with the person, and then you can go through a different set of exams to see if you're really compatible, and then you will donate. And the donation of your bone marrow is just as if you are donating blood, right? So it's the same thing. They will take blood out of us, put our blood back after being filtered to take what they need to transplant the bone marrow, and we will be all set. And this takes about a month, with 2 or 3 or 4 visits to do all the exams and all these things. So it is something that we can do to help. So if you're out there and if you didn't know about it, if you want to go after it, just search for Be The Match or for Icla da Silva. Icla is ICLADASILVA, da Silva, Icla da Silva. So yeah, it's a foundation, and you know everything about it. If you put there on the website, just Google it, and you will be able to find it. So this gentleman, who was 6 years old, had leukemia and was dying. So the physician who were accompanying Andre Vicente and Aniceto, he says that he is into a coma, right? And then we need to facilitate his disengagement, meaning we would say it here, his death. But what it is that the spirit is still connected to the body, and with the help of the spirits, this disconnection can be facilitated, since he is already really, the body doesn't withstand the presence of the spirit anymore. And Andre will say this in a few minutes. Aniceto examines the body, right, the man, and says, yeah, there's nothing left but to help the spirit to disengage from the body. And then Aniceto tells Andre to concentrate, to focus on the dying man, to focus on the body. And he tells us that he starts to see the man, he starts to see the soul, right, starting to withdraw from the body, to disengage in certain points of the body. And he says that he was astonished by seeing seeing that right in the center of his skull, right where the brain is, there was a point of dying light resembling a candle fluttering softly in the wind. So this candle, or this light, right, was filling the entire encephalic region, or the brain, the area inside of the skull, right? And then he says, well, I never saw that. And Aniceto says, well, that light is the mind. So it is interesting that Aniceto says that. And then he says something that I'd like to point out here. And I wouldn't say to make a correction, but it's just to make a further explanation, even because he will say it again close to the end of the chapter. So I'd just like to clarify this first part that he says here. When it in the book that I have here, right? Maybe they already changed it in another edition of the book. But he says, we have no human concept to explain its exact purpose at present. And it is not exactly what Aniceto wants to say here. The words in Portuguese would say more or less, we have no human concept to explain its essential definition, or we have no human concept to explain the essentiality of what the mind really is, and not what the exact purpose of the mind is. So what Aniceto wants us to understand here is that, okay, this is the mind. So he is making a differentiation here between mind and spirit, right? So it's not the same thing, and it's hard for us to really convey something that he didn't have the words to say. But if we can try to go further on what he wants to say here, is he wants to say that, okay, I am a spirit, right, and I have my thoughts. So I am not my thoughts. I am creating my thoughts. And the mind is where, let's say, we create these thoughts. And not only what I can think of and know that I am thinking, but there's much more than just that. There are those thoughts, quote unquote, here, that are not created, let's say, with a conscience by me. It is something that already became, how could I say it, automatic, because of the repetition that I've been doing, that me as a spirit have been doing since the moment that I was created. So the mind has all these, if we could say, for example, you're using an app, right? And then the app on your phone, let's say it's a map, right? It's one of those apps that you use like a GPS. So the map is there. If you're just looking at the map and you're walking, you see that the map is walking, quote unquote here, walking with you. So there are some things there that are automated, right? But the map doesn't know where you want to go until you say it to the map, right? You say it to the app. So the app has parts of it that are already pre-programmed. And then there's what I put into the map, which is my destination, right? Or in the middle of my destination, I want to stop at a gas station, or I want to stop to eat something, or I want to stop to buy something that I forgot and I don't know exactly where is the nearest supermarket, for example. Then I go into the GPS and say, hey, I need to go to to the supermarket, and then the GPS will say, or the app will say, well, there are 3 or 4 around. Which ones do you have? Do you want to go? Which one do you want to go to? And then you choose that one, and then the map, the app recalculates your path, and then now you go to that place, and then the map sends you back to your destination, right? So the mind, it would be something like that. The mind has the capability of having something that was already pre-programmed, that we pre-programmed in previous incarnations, in our previous lives, and even in this life itself that we are living right now, and we can add more information to it. So it is interesting that we have these metaphors, right? These modern metaphors to try to understand better what is the mind. And by what Aniceto is saying here, and he will repeat it later, or he will say it in a different way later, is the mind is not the spirit. It is part of the spirit, but it is not the spirit, and it is not the brain. He doesn't say it here right now, but it is not the brain. When he gets to that point, I will make another comment on that. So Aniceto notices Andre Luiz's amazement when he sees that light, and then he decides, well, I'm going to put my hand on his forehead, and I will give him a magnetic influx, a vigorous magnetic influx. And then he says, well, Andre, now look again. And behold the humanized divine machine, the sacred tabernacle that the Lord enabled to form on earth as the sublime temporary habitation of the Spirit. This is really interesting here, because what is, I would highly, highly recommend you to go and read at least the Wikipedia page on this word tabernacle, right? Where this word comes from. And just a brief summary of what a tabernacle is, right? The Hebrews, when they were moving away from the slavery from Egypt, right, and they were looking for their promised land, they had to build these tabernacles that were their houses, quote unquote, here, while they were walking on the desert, right? So a tabernacle is not something that is fixed, that is the ultimate house that I will always come back to. It is, in some sort, that idea, but it is not something that is fixed, right? You stay there for a while, then you need to move on. So you get your house, then you move to a different place, and then you open your house again, or your tabernacle again, and then it is interesting that Aniceto makes this comparison of our bodies as this tabernacle, and he will say it again later on, either him or Andre. And it is very interesting that he makes this comparison because we are temporarily, right, in this tabernacle that we are living right now. So right now I am speaking as Mackenzie. I was born as Mackenzie in this incarnation 42 years ago, right? But I was not in this body always, right? Previously I had a different name. I was in a different body. Later, hopefully much later, I will be in a different body, right, with a different name, and these will all be our tabernacles, because what's inside, it's what's important, right, the temporary habitation of the Spirit. And then Aniceto goes on and says, Andre, you're not looking at an anatomical demonstration of earthly science, examining dead flesh and rigid muscles. You're not looking at anatomy only, you know. Our eyes could not see what you are seeing right now. Although the microscope is very interesting and is a very noble victory for our limited human eyesight, but it is also limited. And even today, and of course that Aniceto here is talking about, I mean, let's remember again, it's 1944 when this book was written. So there was no PET scan, for example, right? There were no MRIs. And these days, we have all these incredible machines where we can put our bodies into it, and then they will be able to see so many details of our bodies that we were never able to see, right? Only when we were dead, and people would come and then collect the body and study the body, the anatomy of the body, and so on and so forth. In 1944, Andre is describing something that we were not able to see back then. And I'm not even sure that what he is describing here, we can clearly see it today yet. We will be able probably to see it one day, but what he says is that it is as if now he is seeing the body augmented, right, scaled up, let's say 10 times, 3 times, so he can really look inside, right, the body and see the blood flowing, see the microbes, see the bacteria, see all the organs working. But unfortunately, because he is seeing a body of a man that is about to die, he can see all these birds of prey, quote unquote. He uses this expression somewhere here, right? As if these bacteria that are about to kill the body, right? They are killing the body, and with the leukemia, right? The leukemia makes you lose your red cells, right, on the blood. So he is, he says beasts of prey, not birds of prey. I was looking for it here in the text and I couldn't find it. Now my eye just got it here. So it says like there were these minuscule beasts of prey by the 100, right? And then they are destroying the body from the inside. It's time for that man to go. So it is interesting that Andre is describing something that we were not able to see back then when the book was written. And even today we can see a lot of these things already, but not all that he is describing here. So that's for us to really see and understand how much we already developed and how far we still are from really catching up to a lot of these medical terminology. I wouldn't say terminology. These medical conquests that Andre already describes to us, and medicine these days is catching up to some of the concepts that Andre Luis and the Good Spirits on his books are describing to us. So the description is just wonderful. I would highly recommend you to read by yourself and just see how amazing this divine machine really is. We already know, right? We have our bodies, and at least I am awe-stricken sometimes when I think about my body. I think about the bodies of people around me. You know, I have a daughter that now she is doing gymnastics, and it's amazing to see how we can stretch, right, our physical abilities and how our bodies react to what we do, and if we get hurt, it heals itself, right? So it is really, really a divine machine. And then he goes on with all this description. Again, highly recommend you to read it. And with this, I would like to remind everyone, if you haven't got the book yet, oh, please, right? We should have the book by now, right? It's chapter 49. What are you waiting for, right? Hopefully you already have the book with you. So get the book, read it, mark it. It's so powerful for us to, highlight some of these parts that are really interesting for us, so that we can remember it later on if we go back to reread it or to cite something to somebody. So in this book we have this part here. So where is? Oh, it's right here. So just like I did, I'm giving you the advice, and then I didn't mark the beasts of prey here. So buy the book, be it the electronic one, right, or the physical one, but buy the book it is really interesting to have it so we can go back to it and follow what we are studying it here. But then after Andre goes over this whole description of what's going on in the body of this dying man, Aniceto asks him, do you see the divine machine formed by a pre-existing spirit mode? And once again, Aniceto will mention the tabernacle, that the body of an incarnate human being is a tabernacle and a blessing, right? And what is this spiritual mode that Aniceto is talking about? Naturally, he's talking about the perispirit, right? The spiritual body that we have that connects to the about to live cell, right? When the sperm gets into contact with the egg, right? And then they start forming the body. So the perispirit the spirit connects to the body right there, to that cell right there, and then starts the division. And that connection is the one that controls what and how we will form once we incarnate, and that's the spirit mode that Aniceto is referring here to. In other books by André Luiz later on, we will discuss this in much detail, because he goes into much details about the process of incarnation, and also as well about the process of discarnation. Here, there's this process that we see a little bit in 2 chapters. There are books where he describes it in much more detail for us to really see a generic process of incarnation and a generic process of discarnation as well. But Aniceto tells us again and makes the comparison again that our body is a tabernacle and a blessing. And once again, highly recommend at least read the Wikipedia page on tabernacle for you to understand the moving house, right, that goes through the desert, which can also become a very powerful metaphor for our own lives. And a blessing, that's what he says. And of course, our body is a blessing for us to live, to enjoy life, to have our friends, to perform our duties, to do the best that we can with our lives. And Aniceto says, well, you can see from this that you're seeing right now, Andre, that all the movements of the body are subordinate to the managerial processes of the mind. So the mind has this ability to manage, right, everything that's going on in our bodies. And every single thing that happens in our bodies is subordinate to our thoughts. Aniceto makes this very clear. Each organ is an autonomous department in the cellular realm, but subordinate to the individual's thoughts. So our mind, as we were making the comment in the beginning, is where our thoughts are formed, where we form our thoughts. But there are more to the mind than just our thoughts or our conscient thoughts. There are processes below our conscience. They are there that manage, that governs the wonderful factory that is our body. He says, in the mental seat and consequently in the brain, and remember I told early on that he would mention the brain here. I'm going to read again. I'm going to quote, in the mental seat and consequently in the brain are all the distribution records of the vital principles for the cellular nuclei, including water and sugar. The metabolic centers are large workshops of incessant activity. It is interesting that he says that the mental seat, in the mental seat, right, and consequently in the brain. So what he's saying here is that the brain is not what controls our bodies. It's the mind that controls our bodies. The mind is in the brain physically or located in the brain. Right? I would say physically. I would say spatially inside our body or in our body, the mind is located where the brain is. Then the mind sends the messages through the brains, and the brain is the organ that controls the body. So everything comes from the mind, goes to the brain, and the brain does everything it needs to do to control our bodies. So it is interesting that he says that because, as spiritists, we already have this concept, right, that we are spirits and that it's not just matter that matters, right, for us. We have other ideas. We have a different concept of what life really is. And what Aniceto is saying here again is that, hey, look, please pay attention to your body. Do the best you can to have your body sane, right? Eat well, exercise. Well, he doesn't say this, right? But we all know this. Exercise, eat well, sleep well, and all that stuff. But remember, you're more than just material. The material life that you live in. You're more than matter. Your mind is very important as well. So he goes on, the human mind, although indefinable by limited scientific earthly concepts, is the center of all manifestations of life on the planet. So it is the human mind that controls it. We have control over so many things that we are still not aware of. And these days, with scientific evidence and with scientific research, we can see more and more how our minds, how our wishes, how what we think affect our bodies. So it is not the brain physically only that affects my body, but my mind affects my body. So if I don't forgive a person, for example, studies link with high probabilities the occurrence of certain types of cancer to a lack of forgiveness. You know, if you hate, if you have that feeling, that sensation of hate, you're more prone to being sick. If you love more, on the other hand, you're much likely to be a healthier person than one that hates or that has bad feelings towards other people or even towards oneself. So it is, and we know that already, right? We know that these days. But it is interesting that Aniceto is telling this here in 1944, where maybe people had an idea, but there were not a large range of scientific studies to prove that. So we are being confirmed, these concepts are being confirmed day after day through our science, through our researches. And then he confirms once again that we have this body, right, was molded, right, by the pre-existent spirit body. So, and why is this important? I guess, and that we already talked about this a few times here, but I'm going to repeat it again. Our perispirit controls, and I just said that, right? Our perispirit controls what our body will be when we grow, right? So we have this, the perispirit is set up before we incarnate to say, okay, here you're probably going to have this type of disease or this type of problem, and so on and so forth. And then we can clearly see this when we have in the same family, for example, and people, our parents all have this type of disease that's usually transmitted through generations, and then lots of people are born with it, and then one or two are not born with it. Why? If we want to believe in in randomness, let's say, well, it was random, but when we start to see that there is nothing random in this realm, we will see that that person, that spirit, did not have the need to have that specific type of disease. So the body, the perispirit, is controlling what the person will have when the person is born. So why is this important? Because our bodies now are and were formed by our perispirit. But if we mentally damage our bodies, and if we don't use our tabernacle as a blessing, we may, and we saw this in Andre Louis' case, right, in No Solar, we may damage the perispirit. And if we damage the perispirit, it is going to be much harder for us to get a complete and healthier body on my next incarnation. That's why it is very important for us to take care of our bodies right now and to really take a good care of what we have as a tabernacle. Notwithstanding, we have to remember that we need to understand that it is a balance, right? We're not going to focus 100% only on the body, but it is also not very healthy to just concentrate 100% on the spiritual life, because we are still here incarnated. So we have to really balance it out. We have to have some focus on the body, making it healthy, following doctor's orders, taking the medicine when we need to, but eating more healthily, and so on and so forth. But as well, taking good care of my mind, taking good care of what we think, of how we think, what we say, how we behave mentally, how we behave psychologically. Otherwise, we will be damaging our bodies as well, and sometimes even harder than just with food. Just if we remember what Jesus taught us about this, he says, it is not what goes in your mouth that harms you, but that what goes out from your mouth that harms you. What is he referring here to? Of course, he's referring to our mental activities, right? To my feelings, and that's what all these scientific researchers are doing to prove that what we think, what we do mentally, psychologically, morally affect my physical life. But of course, it is necessary for us to also take good care of our bodies. And that's where Aniceto also will reach, because he says it right after the last thing we read from here. He says it literally. For this reason, because of this reason, because we have this pre-existing body, because we have this mind that controls the sublime machine, the day will come, and I'm quoting here, the day will come when science will recognize every human abuse as actually being self-inflicted harm. So it is interesting that in 1944, again, please pardon me for repeating this so frequently, that how far in the future was this book when it was written in 1944. And today we're just confirming, as the day passes, we're just confirming that what Aniceto was saying is true, right? That we abuse our bodies through our minds, through what we do physically, and medicine already started to confirm that what we're doing is we are self-inflicting harm, right? That we are harming ourselves by what we think, by what we say, by what we eat, by what we hate. And on the other hand, if we eat healthily, if we eat healthy, if we think good thoughts, if we love more, we will have the same effects, but on the positive side than if we do on the opposite side. He finalizes this part by saying that each cell is a tiny engine running on mental impulse. So if we want to have a healthier body, other than eating well, thinking good thoughts, doing good deeds, one thing that we could do, talk. And here I'm probably going to sound like a crazy person if I haven't sounded like a crazy person before, maybe every chapter. But if we talk to ourselves, right? If Aniceto is telling us each cell is a tiny engine running on mental impulse, and I am in control of my mind, why couldn't I just try to talk to myself, right? To say, hey, look, I know, why don't you treat me better, right? I'm going to try to treat you better. Why don't you treat me better, right? I love you, my cell, right? And I'm not talking about the cell phone, because I know that a lot of us, right, talk to our cell phones, right? Oh, I love you. Sometimes when the cell phone is turned into a GPS, we talk to the GPS as if we're talking to the person. Oh, no, you're wrong. It's not that way, and so on and so forth, right? But it's not to that cell that we're talking here. Aniceto here is talking about our cells, right, inside our bodies. So that's what he is telling us. You know, if these cells are controlled, are running on mental impulse, why shouldn't I be able to talk to these cells, right, on mental impulse, and send these cells my love for them, my love for this body, this divine temple, this tabernacle, this blessing, right, of a house that our Father gave us for this specific life. Right after that, right, Aniceto pauses for a few moments, and Andre is still looking at what's going on, and Aniceto resumes what he is saying to finalize this chapter. He says, hey, look, Andre, this gentleman here, this brother, is about to disengage from his body. But look, once again, notice his inability to control his conflicted cells. Isn't it what we were just talking about? So when Aniceto says that he doesn't have the ability to control his conflicted cells, is not as if Aniceto is saying that, oh, I will be able to control my cells just by thinking and say, right now, do this, and then the cells will do it. It's not about this type of control, but it's the ability of, through time, right, to create the ability through repetition, through education, right, instead of being a person that it has not, let's say, has not discipline to do something, to really strive to do that at the same time, or to finalize what we started, then we are not teaching my body. I am not teaching my body. Therefore, I am not teaching my cells to have self-discipline, to have self-control. So, Andre, if you look at his body again, you can clearly see that there's this huge disarrangement here. And we could probably stretch it a little bit and say, maybe it's because he is dying, and then of course it's kind of hard to control if you have this disease, and the disease will kill your body. But what he is saying even further, right, is that maybe if he couldn't control the body anymore, right, the disease is really, really deadly, and he's right at that moment where he cannot do anything else, but because, and if he had mental education, he could have already disengaged himself from the suffering that this is causing to him. However, because he didn't have that mental education, he didn't prepare himself for that moment, he still has not totally abandoned his flesh. So it is in part something that has with the control and the control of his cells, of the conflicted cells, of the problematic cells at that specific moment, but also the problem of disengaging from the body. And then Aniceto goes on and says, this can be noticed in the excessive intemperance of the cells, over which he does not even have partial control. So the intemperance, it clearly shows that he was somebody who didn't have self-discipline. Therefore, his cells will not have the self-discipline to really try to fight or to really try to avoid certain things. And more than this, he could be disengaged from that situation much quicker if he also had this self-discipline, this self-control. His physiological elements are too impulsive, obeying instinct much more than concentrated reason. So we have instinct. Everybody has instinct. The instinct of these cells is to protect. But how they can protect if they don't have at least a little bit of reasoning? And the other, sometimes you have to use the reason to say, oh, my instinct is to take this out of here. But if I leave it just for a little bit more, even if I suffer a little bit more, it can be helpful because I have this other group of cells here. They are being formed right now, and they will be able to do a much better job if we can withstand a little bit more on this side. So we can use the reasoning to back out, right, what we have, a situation that we have right now, and then work on with that to improve my situation. So inside of our minds, we have instinct that was built upon my other incarnations, but I also have reasoning inside my mind. What am I feeding right now? Am I feeding reasoning, or am I only feeding instinct, right? Through my self-discipline. What am I teaching my body? What am I teaching my cells? And what am I teaching myself as a spirit in this process of this balance between materiality and spirituality? And he finalizes the chapter, not finalizing the case. We will come back to it next week. But to finalize the chapter, he tells us, to tell you the truth, our friend here is not discarnating. He is being expelled from the divine machine, where, from what we can see, it seems he did not fully appreciate the sublime gifts of God. Are we appreciating, showing appreciation to God for having received this wonderful gift that is this divine machine, that is this tabernacle, that is this blessing of a body that we all have? Are we thankful enough to God for this? This is something for us to think about. This is something, and I'll leave you to think about this for a week if you're listening to us live on every Wednesday here on Kardec Radio. If not, you can just jump and go to our next chapter, chapter 50, which we will talk about more next week, once again, here on Kardec Radio, every Wednesday. Okay? So have a great week, everyone, and hopefully I will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.